The Dice Tower is made possible by listeners like you. Thank you for your support. And by Cool Stuff Inc. Cool Stuff, in stock at coolstuffinc.com. The Dice Tower, episode 572.
Epic! Epic, 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 epic. Games! Games, 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 games.
Got to turn down the reverb on this one. Welcome to the Dice Tower, a podcast about board games and card games, and especially the people who play them. On today's show, Tom accuses me of not having a time-consuming job, and we talk about paint. We do some other things too, like read a tale of amazement, avoid responsibility with Jeff, and present our top 10 epic games. I'm future Eric Summerer, and I've been up late watching American Ninja Warrior. And here's your host, the Homer of board gaming, Tom Vassell.
I guess.
You guess?
Well, no, that seems legitimate. I'm playing the epic games. I'm not making them.
Okay. But
I am a guy who sang the Iliad at some king's court somewhere.
Okay.
Okay, folks, welcome. I'm Tom Vassell.
Hi there. I'm Eric Summerer.
Yeah, so it's been such a couple weeks of non-board gaming stuff going on. So, just a lot going on. However, happily, it seems like the board game universe slowed down briefly. So that's always good.
Well, that's good. I'm sure it'll pick up in plenty of time soon.
Sure, Essen is coming. The end of the year is coming. And I've been just having such a great time on some aspects. Like today, I spent a good chunk of the day just working on the Dice Tower headquarters library. So essentially, I'm taking games out of my personal collection. My personal collection's now down to probably like 100 or less games.
Okay.
Which is very, very small. Frankly.
Wow. Yeah.
But what I'm doing is I'm building a collection of games for the Dice Tower headquarters library. We're going to use it for the Dice Tower retreats and for Dice Tower Cruise. I don't know if we're going to be able to take it to the other Dice Tower cons yet, and they probably need a bigger library than that anyway, but we're going to build it. But see, this library is unique in that the games are mine, right? So they have all their expansions. They have a nice insert sometimes. Sometimes, I've upgraded the pieces inside them. I'm just pleased with that. It's like a really cool collection, in my opinion.
Cool.
I'm even getting a couple games I don't like and sticking them in it.
All right.
Well, I would have been perfectly content with just the games from my collection. I thought that was legitimate. These are all good games.
Right.
But there's some games people like that aren't in my collection, so c'est la vie. I'll add them in.
Well, you're a nice guy, Tom.
Well, but like I said, so we have to do it. We're getting them together. We're marking what box each one goes into. We're boxing them up. We're checking to make sure the pieces are there. Marking down things. It's kind of cool in one aspect just to put this together. I'm excited for people to see it and play with it. Other things to be excited about. The People's Choice Top 100 of all time is online. You can go vote for it. Now, every 2 weeks we do a top 10 list here on the show, and you can go vote in those top 10 lists. As soon as one is down, the next one is usually up. That reminds me, I need to get the next one up here. But beyond that, we have the People's Choice Top 100, where you can vote for, I think, up to 20 of your favorite games of all time. And we compile that. It's an interesting thing to look at year to year to see how the People's Choice changed from the prior year. Mm-hmm. And you'll see games in this list that you might not see in other lists because it's dynamic and this list changes from year to year. So a game that got a ton of positive love 20 years ago but no one has played in the last 5 won't make this list.
Right.
That's not to say older games don't make the list, but they have to be games that people still will highly rate. And so things like King of Tokyo have been at the top of the list. And you say, well, there's no way King of Tokyo is the favorite game of all time. But it can be.
Right.
It could be.
Plus, it scores high enough on several people's lists, and so it gets a high score cumulatively.
Right, and we're not asking people to list all their favorite games. We're just asking them to list up to 20. All right, so now here's the news I'm super excited about. Last Tuesday, a week from us posting this show, we opened the registration for Dice Tower West.
Mm-hmm.
This is in Las Vegas, and it is coming March. We had room for 750 gamers. And it's going to be just like Dice Tower Con, 24-hour gaming. Me and Eric and Sam and Z and Jason and Crystal and Abby will all be there. It's going to be super fun and exciting. And it's sold out.
Yes.
Well, that's good, right? Yay, it's
Yay.
sold out because, we want to get a lot of people coming. Some people were annoyed by that because they didn't get their tickets in time.
Right.
Yeah, but the good news is we talked to the hotel, and the hotel, because they are surprised that we got so many people to come to this thing, we renegotiated and we're able to get a bigger space.
Oh.
So what this means is we can now have exhibitors at the convention. We weren't planning on having them before. So we can have some exhibitors there, but we can also add 100 or so more people.
Okay.
Registration for this is going to go live today as of us posting this. If you're hearing it later, go check as fast as you can. But 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on September 11th, Tuesday.
Okay, so that's
right.
10 Eastern.
That's I think that's what that is. Right? 7 Pacific, 10 Eastern Standard Time. So, or Daylight Savings Time, whatever. So if you missed the boat, you want to go in there and get it. They're also going to open the hotel block at that time. However, the hotel price will not be as inexpensive as the original ones. It does not come with the hotel breakfast buffet like the first set does. Mostly because the hotel can't have 1,000 people come to breakfast every day.
Okay.
Yeah, but I fully expect these to sell out too. So if you're listening to this podcast, I would pause it and go do that and then come back.
Sure.
Other things. As of you listening to this, both me and Eric are gearing up to go to conventions. Tell us about yours first, Eric.
Indeed. I'm going to be at Grand Con in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I guess as of this posting, this coming weekend. I have... It's been a few years since I've been to Michigan. I haven't been to Grand Rapids in several years. I grew up in Kalamazoo, so it's sort of old stomping grounds. I'm looking forward to seeing what Grand Con looks like. I've heard some great things. Got to check out their library and see how they've curated that one. It's going to be a good time. I'm doing an improv show, a D&D themed improv show. And next episode, Mandy will be there as well. And Mandy and I are doing episode 573 from Grand Con. It's not a big show. We're just going to grab some time and chat about what we did at the show. But I'll be sure to give an update on how that improv show went, what we've been playing. It's going to be a good time from Grand Con this coming weekend.
And I'm going to be me and Z Garcia are going to be at Midgard. This is a convention in Iceland. It's called Midgard, Iceland's first all-inclusive convention, a 2-day event that's at a place I can't pronounce, at another place I can't pronounce, in Iceland.
How are you going to tell the cab driver where you're supposed to go?
Come on now, I just show him it on my phone.
I need to go here, please.
That's really how that works out. So I'm pretty pumped about that. It's going to be fun. I mean, I don't know much about it. We'll be doing a top 10 there, and we're going to see other people there. It's not just gaming, right? There's all kinds of things. It's geeky stuff, comics and miniatures and all sorts of things. So we're looking forward to that. And if you are one of our fans in Iceland, we hope to see you there.
Cool. And I'm sure we'll hear all about it in 2 weeks when you do a show with Suzanne for 574.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's okay. So that's going to be interesting. We'll be splitting up and changing things. Whew, can we keep up? All right. Well, let's jump into some games that we played, and it looks like we both played the same game.
We did. It appears that this is sort of the hotness amongst all of us. I saw Mandy and Suzanne's Twitter feeds as well. They've been playing this game as well. It's the latest from Osprey Games, Cryptid.
Now, one thing about Cryptid that we should mention, first of all, is that when you look at the cover, you're going to see some weird-looking creature, and it looks really cool. And the theme of Cryptid is to find this, like a jackalope or abominable snowman or some weird. A cryptid apparently is some animal that we're not sure really exists, but we're looking for it.
Yes, you are cryptozoologists, and you are searching for the lair, the homestead of a mythical beast.
Oh, that's so cool. That theme is neat. I'm going to go hunt down these animals. Once you open the box, that theme is completely gone, and I haven't thought about it once since playing the game.
Yeah, I think you're right.
No, we gotta be straightforward with people. The problem this game has, and spoiler, I love the game.
Yep.
But the problem the game has is it looks like an abstract game with blocks and cubes and things. The theme is not there, and if that's something you're going into the game expecting, I want to just dash cold water on you right now.
Yeah, and I mean they make a big deal about the Kwanchai Moria art. He's right there on the front, along with the designers' names, and I guess it is a little surprising when you open it up. And yeah, there's lovely textures on the tiles, but it is a lot more basic than it would appear on the front of the box.
Yeah. So the first thing that this game reminded me, let me see if Eric agrees with me. What was the first game that popped in your head when you saw this?
Tobago.
That's right. Same here. And Tobago's a game that Eric and I both really enjoy.
Yeah.
I think you might still own it, right?
I actually have to look. This is probably going to knock it out if I haven't already gotten rid of it.
Now, Tobago has more theme for sure, and it's a prettier game.
True.
In Tobago, you are trying to find a certain spot on basically a grid, a hexagonal grid, but you are deciding where the spot is.
Yes.
You are eliminating things, but you are choosing how things are eliminated until you narrow it down till you find the spot.
Mm-hmm.
In Cryptid, the spot is already chosen through a deck of cards or through an app, which I checked, and a couple times it generated a scenario for me. It was not one of the cards, so I thought that was cool. That means there's a ton of replayability.
Oh, that's cool.
There's a specific spot on this map, and this map is a modular map. There's 6 pieces you put together in various orientations. There's a specific spot on this map that you are trying to figure out what it is. First person to figure it out wins. Each person in the game, which is 3 to 5 players, is given a book, and in that book there is a very specific clue. It will say this spot is within 2 spaces of an ocean tile, or a water tile, or it's not next to a white building, or it is not on a bear preserve, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have one clue, so you know one thing. So you can narrow it down to, well, some of the tiles on the board. There's still going to be a ton. You're not going to be able to narrow it down that much. Everyone's clues put together will give exactly one spot on the board. So then you spend time asking each other questions and saying, could it be here to somebody else? And they will say yes or no. And they'll put a cube on the board if it's a no. They'll put a disc on the board if it's a yes, if it could be there. Or you can even say, I think it's here. And then everybody will say yes or no. However, once someone says no, people stop answering. And anytime anyone ever says no to you, you must also put a no answer on the board somewhere. Mm-hmm. And when you say, I think it's here, you're also telling everybody that it could be there for you. So you're giving out a lot of information.
Yes.
But that's how you win the game. The game takes 20 minutes maybe?
Sure.
Or maybe 20 to 30 minutes. It's not really that long of a game. What did you think of it?
I really enjoyed it. I mean, we talked about other deduction games where you're having to ask all sorts of crazy questions and figure out lots of categories of things. This is very focused. You are looking for one spot on the map, and you're trying to suss out what everyone else's rule is so that you could, because in theory, if you knew what everyone's clue was, you could pretty quickly figure out the space. So the deduction is figuring out what everyone else's rule is. And then also sort of misleading the people through the placement of your cubes and discs to lead them off the trail of what your rule is, maybe pretending you have a different rule that also still matches your rule. You can't lie. But what you focus on, what information you give and when is part of misleading your opponents while you're still trying to suss out what they've got. I really enjoyed the focus, the simplicity of this one. Yeah, I think this is really solid. And again, the quick play time makes it so that we immediately wanted to play again. There's a basic and an advanced game. There's the basic game has only positive clues. So it's only, it is within 3 spaces of this. It is on one of these 2 types of terrain. Whereas the advanced game has the negatives. It is not within 2 spaces of water. It is not near the bear habitat. And I think, maybe 1 game of the basic is all you need to jump right into the advanced. I
actually have not yet played a basic game of it.
Oh, okay.
Because I was like, I think I can handle the advanced, and yeah, it's not that hard.
No. My only complaint is I wish that the animal habitats had been labeled slightly differently. I don't know what the solution was, but I mixed them up. You've got
because one's called a bear and one's a cougar, I think.
Yes.
And one shows a paw, and I'm like, is that a bear paw or a cougar paw? I don't remember.
And it is a cougar. It's a claw that's the cougar, and then it's a picture of a bear head. But if you're not looking right at it, it's very small. It looked to me like a cougar head. And so I mixed the 2 up. I was like, that's a bear claw and there's a cougar. Okay. And so one of my clues was related to what terrain it was near. And when we narrowed it down, I played consistently, but to the wrong terrain. We ended up with 2 possible spaces instead of the 1 like it was supposed to be. The game still worked. We still enjoyed it, but there is that potential, and I don't know how they could have done it, maybe with a B and a C instead of those bear symbols and stuff. They have a lovely player aid that I just totally ignored. I saw the claw and said bear, and that's not right.
So one of the problems with the game is that Eric messed it up.
Yes.
But I like the game a lot. The only thing that stopped me from giving it like a perfect score really is it's just so Spartan looking. When Z put his review of it up on the video thing, there's so many comments about people talking how ugly it looks. I don't think it looks ugly. I just don't think it looks pretty.
Well,
and I think the gameplay trumps that. This is the Dominion of logic games. When you play Dominion as a deck builder, just buy cards, done.
Yep.
And then other deck builders added theme and all that stuff. This is the same way. It's like boom, boom, boom. But it's pure, cool, fast logic. It's not that hard. I'm just sitting there trying to think out what the other people's rules are and trying to make them not figure out mine as much as I can. And that's just very entertaining. It's almost like a deduction filler, but I don't know that it's not light enough for that. This is a great game. I really like it.
Yeah, this one's sticking around for sure. I sort of bristle at the ugly comments because this is one of those games that there's so much information on the board. I wouldn't want too much more to get in the way.
Come on, look at Tobago. That's the natural comparison, and that game looks pretty and doesn't have that much info on the board.
Maybe
like for example, just the big. The tents or the buildings in this game. What are they? They're like just geometric shapes.
They're just
they could have put
squares.
Buildings and it would have worked just as fine.
Okay, I'll give you that. They could have made a deluxe version or a more sculpted version and still had the sparse terrain. That would be my concern. Is if you put too much more on the terrain tiles, it would get in the way of the information that the cubes and the discs provide. Because the other cool thing about this is they suggest you take notes, but you really don't need to because all of the information
disallow that.
All of it's on the board. You've got all the cues. So anytime you look at the player's color and you see what they've answered, they've said yes to these spaces, they've said no to these spaces. It's all there, which is pretty cool as a system.
All right. Well, my next game is the story of a lovely lady.
Interesting.
Who was bringing up 3 very lovely girls, and actually I don't remember.
Tell me more. What color was their hair?
I don't care. All right. So it's the Brady Bunch game. Now, the Brady Bunch game is part of I guess it's a line of games at this point from...
Is it Big G?
Yes, the Brady Bunch Party Game, actually, from Big G Creative. Now, Big G Creative has done some pretty impressive games. They came out the gate last year with How to Rob a Bank and Shifty-Eyed Spies and The Wizard Always Wins. But the game that really people were talking about was the Bob Ross game.
Yes.
The Art of Chill. another Bob Ross game, Happy Little Accidents, but they also made Home Alone, the Brady Bunch game, and the one game that I still haven't played, but I'm excited to play, Monster Crunch, the breakfast battle game.
Yes, the one with Count Chocula.
Have you played that one yet?
Not yet. I've seen pictures, but I have not. I didn't pick up a copy at Gen Con, and there's so many games to play.
Well, in the Brady Bunch game, one person is mom and dad, and everyone else chooses one of the Brady Bunch kids. In fact, if you have enough players, you can play with Cousin Oliver.
Wow.
Which no one in our group wanted to. There was some discussion about the merits of Cousin Oliver existence. Things got kind of pointed and mean towards his character. I don't remember enough about the Brady Bunch to remember his character at all.
Well, as soon as you bring out Cousin Oliver, your game has jumped the shark.
That's what okay, yes, that was actually some of the comments made. Unfortunately, there was a little bit too much song being sung, Marsha, 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 and blah, blah, blah. But anyhow, so each person is a kid. And as the game goes by, one of the kids is going to be a troublemaker, and one of the kids is going to be like the tattletale, and the other kids are trying to cover up for the troublemaker. Great. It's a social deduction style game. And you're playing cards face down, and every once in a while you can look at someone else's card, and mom and dad can come in, and sometimes they can look at a card that's been played. And then at the end of the game, whoever has played the most high cards is the troublemaker, and whoever's played the lowest total on their cards is going to be the tattletale. And the person playing the parents must identify the troublemaker. So it's really weird as a social deduction game because you don't actually know your role. You don't know your role the whole game. Now, you could play all high cards and assume you're the troublemaker. But someone could have played a higher total than you, and they're the troublemaker. And the person playing the parents can use them a couple times over the course of the game to look at cards. So, in a game, I looked at Jason, who was playing the game. I looked at his card. I looked at one of the cards he played, and it was a high card. I looked at one of Melody's cards, and it was a low card. Therefore, I assumed Jason Troublemaker, Melody Tattletale. Actually, I'm sorry, I have it reversed. But yeah, the same thing. I thought Melody was a Troublemaker, Jason was Tattletale because I looked at those one cards.
Okay.
Those happened to be the single cards they played that were out of sync with the rest of their cards. And when it was all done, we were all like, oh, okay. And they're supposed to be like, you're supposed to sit there and persuade them, like, it wasn't me. It was, it was Marsha who did this. It was Brad. It was this other person's name who I don't remember because I didn't really watch the show in the 70s, person. But you don't know. There's no like real information going around. Yeah, you can look at a few cards over the course of the game, but you really don't know. And you don't even know if you're guilty. I don't know. I found this one to be a mess. It almost feels like this one's a cash-in on the theme, which I feel is unfortunate, but nobody I played it with liked it. So,
Well, you got to give him credit for trying something different. At least it wasn't a, roll and move, cash in, reskin, but...
Sure. And like I said, this is for them the first misstep for me. I have liked all the rest of their games so far. Cool. So, yeah, but, it is what it is. And I know that this is one that was probably on your radar.
I was, mildly interested, but I ended up passing on all those. I think the breakfast cereal one was the one that was most interesting to me from this recent batch.
Yeah, well, I think I have all of them, so you'll be hearing from me on all of them. I'm kind of spacing them out and playing a few at a time. I picked the Brady Bunch because I don't know why. I just thought it sounded interesting. Oh, Alice makes an appearance too. Oh, wait, maybe you're Alice, and you're using the parents to help you figure out who the troublemaker is. Yeah, I think the one person is not the parents, but it's Alice.
Ah, okay.
And she uses the parents. You have the tokens for the parents to look at a card once per game for each parent used. That's what it was. Sorry.
So this just confirms that Alice is the real head of the household.
Did anyone doubt that?
No, not really.
All right. Brady Bunch Party Game. I will pass on it.
So one of my favorite games for families, I know I named it as my number one family game. I don't think it was this past year, but the year before, Meeple Circus. Maybe it was this past year. Yeah, this is only a year old. Meeple Circus, the dexterity game, where you're doing it to a soundtrack and trying to acquire circus performers and then stack them up in various acts and earn points for doing crazy things. You'll have that just driving through your head. There is an expansion that came out, debuted at Gen Con. It's the Wild Animal and Aerial Show. This is one of those expansions that just sort of adds more stuff. There's not a whole lot of rules tweaks. I think the only rules change is that you start with 3 acrobats instead of 2 that you usually have. It adds, however, some cool new custom meeples, like there's a lion that has an open mouth that one of the bonus cards is actually stick the head of a meeple in the mouth of the lion. That will earn you points. There's a tightrope walker that has like a long stick that they're trying to hold, and you have to stick them on a tightrope or one of these boards, plank things, and get them as high as possible, and that's how they earn lots of points. It has more figures. It's got more cards. It's got a couple of variant rules that you can throw in if you want, like to make the game more difficult. For example, you may want to have all one act. Usually you can have a bunch of little clusters of meeples all over your board, but in this variant rule, you have to have everything together. Everything has to be touching or it doesn't count, which certainly for adult players would be, would make things a lot more difficult. My youngest, however, is still struggling with just basic Meeple Circus. So just throwing in the new stuff works perfectly at his level. That is where we're still playing the game. I don't need those extra let's make the game harder cards. But if you like Meeple Circus, there's no reason not to get this. It just has more of the stuff you love, more unique meeples, more fun. It's exactly what Meeple Circus has been. So huge thumbs up for the Wild Animal and Aerial Show for Meeple Circus.
I'm trying to figure out if I have this or not. I actually just was looking at Meeple Circus today because it was one of the games that I was putting into the Dice Tower library. I like the game. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking, I wonder if I had the expansion somewhere, but I could not find it.
I'm not. I think I remember Jason grabbing it for you at Gen Con, but the way I got it was rather humorous. They sold out of the first wave at Gen Con, and what they arrived with, they're like, more are coming by the end of the day. They were not in the boxes. They were like in envelopes. And the box was flat packed, and all the pieces were just put in there. It was like a pre-broken down expansion box, which was great because it was great for travel. It didn't take up any extra space. And then I just recycled the box and threw the pieces in the main box, and it was great. It was just unusual. I've never seen an expansion sold that way before.
I don't know. I kind of like when expansions come with disposable stuff because I dispose the boxes anyway.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, there was very little packaging. It was, just a standard tuck box, and I didn't need that. So, yeah, it all fits in the main box. You're all set.
Maybe that's why I don't know if I have it or not, because it might be in a pile of smaller things.
Yep, you just need to look for a lion. If you see the lion, you've got the expansion.
All right, the last game I want to talk about today is Spell Smashers. Now, this is a word game with a dungeon crawl theme to it.
Okay.
And I'd like to just start out by saying, A, I like the game, but B, I'm not convinced that this is the best mashup. Like, for me, it works. Like, I like dungeon crawls, and hey, I like, word games. But I don't know that I would want to play this with Grandma because she's not going to care one whit about the dungeon crawl part. So I think the audience is kind of restricted here. But, who knows? So in this game, you are going to be fighting monsters. And you are fighting monsters by making words. So there's going to be 3 monsters out on a table, or maybe more. I can't remember how many exactly are out there, depending on the number of players. But you are going to be, each of these monsters has a certain number of hit points, and that means they have coins. You're trying to get coins in this game. And so each round you will be making a word from cards in your hand. You'll have consonant and vowel cards. And you'll make a big word or some sort of word to attack a monster with. Now, these words are going to be worth a certain amount of damage. Damage comes in 3 different types because some monsters might be weak to fire damage. So this F, which is worth 2 fire damage, will now do 4 damage to that monster. Or, it might be strong against fire damage, and so your F doesn't do anything against that monster. So everyone makes a word at the same time. You reveal your words, and whoever has the most letters in their word goes first. They attack a monster, they get the coins, and so on and so forth. If you're the person to do the finishing blow, you also get the monster's tile, which happens to be a letter itself that you can use in future words, and more importantly, is 3 points at the end of the game.
Huh.
Between turns, you can use this money you've gotten to buy healing potions, to buy potions that might change one letter to another letter, to buy equipment, weapons, and armor that you can use to do different things. Like now your fire damage does double damage this turn, or, if your word is 6 or more letters, you do an extra 3 damage or whatever. Or you can just go to the tavern and get extra points by bragging about your exploits. See, whenever you fight a monster, you also might possibly, depending on what kind of monster it is, take 1 or more wounds. In this game, there's a deck of wound cards that you add to your hand that are also letters. Usually they're combination letters like ER or TE or sometimes just Z. And you could use these in future words to fight monsters with these. They don't give you as much damage, but they're also a little bit harder to stick in words. But you can use them, and you need to use them because if your hand fills up with wound cards, you will have to spend a turn basically getting rid of them. But anytime you use any card, vowel or consonant or wound, they're discarded. And then at the end of each round, you'll draw back up to 7 cards, but any wound cards will clog up your hand a little bit with letters and combos that you may or may not want to use. You do this, I think, for 8 rounds, and then whoever has the most points at the end is the winner. You have goals that you are also trying to do. You have like a goal card that says, make a word that has more vowels and consonants, or make a word that has the same starting letter as the monster that you're attacking. So I like it. It's basically making a word game. If you like paperback,
Yep.
This is kind of in the same wheelhouse, I think. And I think people will, the art is good. It's done by, I think, the same guy who did the Raiders of the North Sea series and stuff. I like it a lot. My biggest concern with it is just like, who am I? I don't think my wife would be interested in the whole fight monsters thing.
Okay.
But she would love the word part of it.
Yeah.
So she'd be like, oh, yeah, we're making words. I'm like, okay, now between words, we need to go to town. Are you going to go to the tavern? Are you going to go buy equipment? I'm like, wait, what? That's my concern.
Yeah.
But I did enjoy it.
Okay.
That's Spell Smashers.
And it is a deck builder, very similar to paperback.
Not really. It's when you use letters, when you make a word to fight someone, you discard all those cards. They're gone. They're not yours. You discard them to the consonant pile, the vowel pile, or the wound pile. And then you just build your hand back up to 7. You always have a hand of 7, but you're not adding new letters that you can keep and use. Except for the monsters, if you do the finishing blow, that monster sits in front of you, you can just use their letter if you need it.
Okay. Forever, for the rest of the game.
Yes. Well, I mean, again, the game isn't that long. I think you make 8 words over the course of the game.
Okay, so each round is just 1 word.
That's correct.
Okay, interesting.
No, I liked it. I'm not very good at it and it's definitely about making words.
Yeah.
The dungeon stuff is very, 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 very tertiary. It's not even secondary.
Okay. Who's the publisher?
Renegade.
Oh, all right.
Games.
Yeah.
So that is Spell Smashers.
Last for me is the latest. It's upcoming from Stronghold Games in the Fast Forward series. These are Freedom and Freese's self-teaching games. This is called Fortune. It is a...
Woo! I can make some money.
It's a slot machine theme. The Fast Forward series doesn't have a rule book. It's just a deck of cards, and it just says start reading. You flip the first card up. You might not even be drawing in any sort of turn order yet. It tells you what to do, how to play it, and sort of leads you into the rules of the game. Fortune is a drafting style game. You're trying to build a hand of 3 cards that will hopefully score you to win the round. If you have the highest total of those 3 cards, you're going to win, although as the game progresses, the rules are going to change, and there will be bonuses for having certain sets of cards, and you'll be able to swap out cards, and that's the whole point of these fast-forward games. As the game evolves, you are adapting to the new rules and the new bonuses and the new cards. This one seems very similar to some of the others that we've seen. It's a little like Fortress. with the one where you're doing the tower defense.
Yes.
You're trying to, and also Fear. I think it's very similar to that one too. For what this is doing, it's very light. You simply play around, and then some cards get discarded. You draw some new ones from the deck, shuffle them all up, and deal them out again. It's made to be played multiple times, much like several of the others. It does that very well. It is a light, evolving game. I think I like the other direction this series has gone, though, with Flee. That's the co-op one, where there was actually a story as you progressed, and there were sort of levels, and you made it to a certain point, and then you sort of saved your progress from there. I wish that we saw more of that style in the Fast Forward line. These quick, casual, evolving games, they're fine. I'm not as engaged here. I was very disappointed when I got to the end of one of the others and found that there was nothing there. It just said shuffle them and start over. You now have the whole game. It's like, but I worked so hard to get to the end. I wanted some sort of reward for doing so. I'd like to see more of that in this series. This is more of the light, casual style here. I'm hoping that Friedemann does more in the other direction. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay, so if you were ranking all the Fast Forward games, how would you do it?
I still think that Flee is my favorite just because of my sensibilities. I like the co-op and the evolving plot of that game. And then,
wow, that's my least favorite.
I think it's just what you're looking for in these things. And then as far as the others go, I would say Fear might be next, and then Fortress, and then this one, but they're very close. Yeah, maybe Fear is lower. I think this one was good. Fear and Fortress and Fortune I'd put equal, and Fear at the bottom.
Okay, well, folks, don't listen to Eric. Fear is my favorite.
I know.
And then Fortress, and then I don't even like Flee. I wouldn't even recommend Flee.
No, I thought Flee was fun.
Flee is... Don't listen to Eric. Flee is a puzzle with a single solution. Boo!
No. Those cards get shuffled after you fail. Things are going to come out in a different order.
Yeah, but there is a single solution at the beginning. And if you fail too many times, you die and got to restart.
But if you got to a certain point, you saved up to that point.
Oh, I hate it. I hate it.
I really enjoyed that.
All righty, well, let's jump over to Jeff and see what he has to say this week.
Yeah, I'm not taking responsibility for this discussion at all.
3, 2, 1, go.
It's time for Game Tech with Jeff Engelstein, where we find out how games really work.
In any group, gaming group, youth group, book club, whatever, there are those who naturally gravitate towards leadership positions, for better or for worse. And when we play a cooperative game, there are often those who tend to want to lead the group. Now, leadership is a skill that is both innate and can be taught. But regardless of how you obtain the skills, scientists have developed surveys that ask people how they would react in certain situations, what they do in their lives, and more, and give them a rating based on their leadership. But are there predictive tests that could be done, seeing how people act in certain situations that would give us more insight into what makes people leaders, and maybe insight into what leadership is? Well, the first experiments in that direction have been taken by a team at the University of Zurich and were recently published in Science. And, of course, they used games to do it. The participants played 3 games. In all of them, even if they were told they were part of a group, more on that later, they were isolated and only interacted with the other participants via the researchers, so there was no body language or appearance or other effects from other people. Now first, each participant took a standard psychology test to get a baseline reading on their leadership. Then they played variations on this game. Each participant was shown part of what was basically a wheel of fortune, with only 2 types of results, win or lose. But only part of the wheel could be seen by the player. The rest was hidden. They then either had to choose to play the game with that wheel and either win or lose some money, or just to pass. So maybe you see half the wheel, and that half looks pretty good for you, but you don't see the other half. Do you play or pass? Now, this touches on loss aversion and risk-taking and other things I've talked about a lot here in Game Tech, but it turns out that those who would play a riskier game were not prone to have high or low leadership scores. There was no correlation. Now, for Game 2, they told players that they were actually part of a group of 5 people. Everyone in the group had the same wheel, but they were each shown different parts of it. Players were then given 2 choices. They could either choose themselves whether to play or pass, or they could let the group vote and whether to play or pass, but then they had to abide by the majority opinion. But either way, only your payout, only that player's payout was affected by their decision. Now, mathematically, it is better to go with the group decision. Even though you can't communicate, as a group you can collectively see more of the wheel, so you have a better chance of making the best choice. But most people tended to want to make the decision themselves, not defer to the group decision. And again, this was completely uncorrelated with the leadership scores. You can't tell who will make their own decision to go or not go with the group consensus just by looking at their leadership score. Now, the last game was exactly the same as the previous one, except the player was told that the decision they made would affect the entire group. Now, they could still just make the decision based on what they could personally see on their part of the wheel, pass or play, or they could toss it back to the group who would vote on whether to pass or play. But regardless of, again, the outcome, it was going to affect everybody's payout, not just the player making the choice. So this change, making it so that it affected everyone, was very revealing. First, the percentage of games where people decided just to make the decision themselves rather than defer to a group vote dropped dramatically. A lot more people opted for the group vote. But it also gave researchers the first insight into leadership. They found something that correlated well with the leadership scores: the difference between how often you make the choice yourself when it only affects you, and how often you want to make the choice yourself when it affects everyone. If there is very little difference between the two, those people tend to be the leaders. If there is a big drop, not so much. For example, when the game just affects my own prize, maybe I rely on myself 80% of the time, but when it affects everyone, I drop to 50%. So it's a 30% drop. I will probably not have a high leadership score. But if in the game just affecting me, I decide to go with my own decisions 50% of the time, and if it affects the group, I also go with my own decision 50% of the time, I probably have high leadership scores. So it's not the absolute scores that matter between these games, it's how much I change when my decision would impact the entire group versus when it just impacts me that counts. The researchers call this responsibility aversion. The higher your responsibility aversion, the less you want to make the choice for the group. You will let the group decide instead. But if you have low responsibility aversion, whether the result of a decision only affects you or affects other people does not impact your willingness to make the call. Now, which comes first is an open question. Do people who are thrust into leadership roles learn to reduce their responsibility aversion? Or do those with lower responsibility aversion tend to become leaders? This will have to wait for more research. Now, the study also examined the brains of people with low and high responsibility aversion and found that their brains activated differently. No time for details now, but I may come back to that in a future segment. So, as you're playing a co-op or any type of group activity, think about responsibility aversion. Do you feel comfortable or uncomfortable about making decisions for the group? And is that a good thing or a bad thing? This is Jeff Engelstein with Game Tech.
So hearing Jeff talk, I sort of was trying to figure out where I fall on this scale. And the term responsibility aversion, although I'm sure it's totally valid, I don't know if that's what's going through my head when I try, like in a co-op game, when I try and get input from everyone. I'm not necessarily trying to avoid being the decider. I'm just want to make sure everyone's involved. Like, I'd hate to jump in and go, well, this is the best move, this is what we should do, and not listen to the other person, especially the newer player at the table, and hear what they want to do. And so I don't know if it's quite the same thing.
I'm a leader. So
yeah, I'm sure you
no,
would
I don't
get
know.
the leader
I'm like
scores.
afraid. I would be afraid to take this test, actually.
Because it would reveal more about yourself?
I don't know. I just trust these tests. That's all I can say. I don't know. Also, then you like second guess yourself the whole time. All right. So I'm going to, but am I just doing this because the test wants me to do it? I'm super confused.
Yeah, I mean, just any psychological testing like this, I don't know how they lull people into behaving authentically. I think if you put a wheel in front of me and you start asking me questions about how I would respond, I'd be like, well, what does that mean? What if I answer this? I don't want to be a statistic on game tech. Okay, hang on. Yeah, I'd freeze. I wouldn't be able to answer any of these questions.
Yeah, if anyone ever pulls me in a room, I'll be like, is Jeff here?
Is he behind that door?
Who's behind that mirror? Alrighty. Well, hey, I want to be uplifted. Uplift me, Eric.
Let's do it. Tales of Amazement. It was 2005. My wife and I were newly married and had just moved to Rochester, New York for my medical residency training. We were from Texas, and since we knew no one, she joined a spouse's social group through the hospital. It was here she met another girl, and it just so happened that this other girl and her husband were also from Texas. Small world. Let's call the new couple Lacey and Bob. They invited us over for dinner one night. Barbecue, of course. We were from Texas, after all. During dinner, we made typical small talk one does when getting to know new people. Where everyone went to college came up a few times, and as it turns out, the other couple had both gone to Ivy League schools, while my wife and I went to, well, non-Ivy League schools. The husband remarked, "Wow, well, isn't it interesting how we went to Ivy League schools and you went to other universities, but here we're all at the same place now?" Now, this may sound like a compliment, but his snarky delivery said otherwise. Similar comments were made throughout dinner. The barbecue was good, and after dinner they asked if we wanted to play a board game. "Great," my wife and I responded. "Well, these are designer European board games," Bob said. "Oh, sounds great," we said again. "Perhaps we'll start with something simple," said Bob. They pulled out Carcassonne. We played it and had a good time. Afterwards, Bob said, "Glad you liked it. Carcassonne is a pretty good beginner game, but we usually play more complicated games." "Oh, bring it on," I said with some bravado. The Ivy League comments had continued during Carcassonne, and I was quite annoyed by now. He pulled out Tigris and Euphrates. After a rules explanation, we began. Now, I will admit, for most of the game, I asked lots of questions. Now, what is an internal conflict now? Oh, this is a priest tile? You win by having the most of the least? And I muddled through. However, towards the end, I had collected fairly high numbers of all the spheres. Upon the final scoring, I thought perhaps I'd done okay and was just happy to have played something so different, new and exciting. Bob revealed his final score. He seemed smugly satisfied with his achievement. "Okay, let me help you add up your final victory points," he said to me. Okay, let me double check, he muttered to himself. Finally, dejectedly, he announced that I had won, and my wife had come in second place, then his wife, Lacey, and finally, Bob in last. Obviously, I still remember this exact play of this board game. 1, because I beat Bob. 2, because it introduced me to our great hobby and the wonderful people who play it, Bob's included. Huzzah!
Yeah, so, anyway, at least it ended well. I'm glad the last 2 words were there, so.
Yes.
Even Bob.
Yes, so I like the attitude. I think it's a good approach. Not only did he win, and that feels good, but yes, that's a great approach. Even the people who are more difficult are welcome at the table.
I'm getting all teary. All right, well, let's jump to some questions.
Tom.
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 Hi, Tom. How many meeples tall are you? How many game pieces have you broken with that gavel you use?
If you could eat at a restaurant based on any game, what would it be?
And now, the Dice Tower will authoritatively, definitely, possibly, maybe, answer your questions.
Tom, which way to the game library?
Sean says, I'm a father to 3 young children, ages 5, 3, and 1. Woohoo! You're having a great time. He says he plays kids' games with his 5 and 3-year-old, and his 1-year-old is starting to show an interest. Sure. Come on now. Stop this nonsense. Okay, but anyway.
Yeah.
My 5-year-old's quite smart. Of course, everyone says it about their 5-year-olds. I'm sorry, folks. This almost makes me want to get into a rant all the time. I'm actually
super snarky just to start.
I know, but listen, I just put together a list of preschool games. I was going to make a top 10 list of games to play with your preschooler, right? Mm-hmm. And so I went online to look for other people's thoughts. I always do that to see what other people say. Oh my goodness. My 3-year-old was starting to play Puerto Rico, and I'm like, shut up. I don't have time for this nonsense. My kids are kids. Sorry. I'm getting all pumped up here. I'm glad your kid's super smart. Anyway.
Yeah.
Sorry, Sean. What I meant was, woohoo. So Sean says, my 5-year-old's quite smart, and I believe that she's ready to start moving beyond our usual kids' games like Guess Who, Ticket to Ride First Journey, and Spot It.
Okay.
However, it's extremely difficult for me to sit down for a game with my 5-year-old without my 3-year-old demanded that she be included too. While I'm happy to have her play as well, I know that she just isn't old or mature enough to handle more complex games, and I expect that it won't be long before I'm experiencing the same with my 1-year-old. How can we start to move on to more complex games, both to keep my 5-year-old challenged and for my own sanity, yet not exclude the other kids? How have you managed that with your own kids?
Well, this is tricky. As you're going through these early childhood years, a single year or two of development can be a huge difference in what they're able to handle. So I feel your pain. What I had successfully done, at least with a few games, is give the younger child something to help the game move along. Like Viva Topo, the game about the mice running around the circle and there's a cat that chases them. You give the dice for the cat to the younger player, the one who's not really playing the game, but they're the cat. And they get to roll the die for the cat, move the cat, and they get the joy of eating the mice, catching the mice. Whereas you and the 5-year-old can work your way through actually strategizing and working through the rules of the game. You can make the younger player the banker, counting money. You can have them organize pieces, do some of the bookkeeping of the game, give them a job and have them involved in the game, but not necessarily having to know all the rules of the game, and then have them start to learn that through osmosis. That's hard to do for every game because there's not always a role like that, but I have had some success with getting everyone involved, at least in some way, by giving a special job to the younger one.
Okay, I slightly disagree with Eric here.
Yeah?
I just say, tough. No.
Oh,
in a nice
to the
way.
3-year-old? You just say, I'm sorry, we can't play
anybody.
this.
Well, yeah, it's time for me to play a game with your brother/sister, whatever. And now you can do something else. And later on, I'll do something with you. Sometimes we'll all do stuff together, but sometimes we're going to do stuff separately. Because as a parent, you have to do this. If you don't, it's just going to follow that older kid the rest of their life. Oh, yeah, I know that your brother went outside and was able to go visit the neighbors and stuff by himself. And even though you're 3 years younger, you can now do that too because you're complaining about it. It's a really bad trend, and it doesn't do the older kid any benefits because he's sitting there going, every time I progress to a certain level, we have to bring along my brother or sister to that level too. Mm-hmm. I don't think it does anyone any good. Sure, you should do stuff together. It should never be, well, it's me and this kid, and sorry guys, I want to play the more advanced games. You got to be as even-handed as you can, but I don't know. You got to teach those kids you don't get to do everything. So that's. In my family, that's how we do it. I'll say sometimes, Jimmy's 4, he'll come up, go, I want to play the game. Like, no, you can sit and watch. You can, but you can't play it because you don't understand this game right now, and we're not going to dumb it down just so he can play it because then that hurts the other kids.
Yes.
So I feel so strongly about this. So, sorry.
I have had this situation because my older one has been coming with me to the local cons for the past couple years, and the younger one keeps asking, when can I go, when can I go? And we did have that discussion that there are some things that you're not ready for. I can't trust you playing a game with adults with mixed company without my direct supervision yet. And when you get to that point, then we can move on to taking you to these events. So that discussion has come out. But if they insist on being at the table, there may be things to do with them that isn't playing the game.
I don't actually have that problem as much now that the iPad's been invented.
There is that. Yes.
I'm like, oh, you can play later. Here's the iPad.
Okay.
But yeah, and as just parenting, you know, I'm the oldest child, if you can't tell at this point in time. Right? And I was like, why do my brothers and sisters get to do things at like years younger than when I did it?
Yeah.
And my parents would be like, well, you know, people mature at different ages. Like, no, that's baloney. You know, come on now. Well, that is true. But I have tried really hard in my family to say, at this age is when we consider letting you do this. And I got to stick with it for all the kids.
Yep.
Now, sometimes that comes back to bite me. But for the most part, they know that I won't waffle too much on that. And that makes the older kids feel special sometimes. And all the other kids will get there eventually.
Yes.
All right.
So Henry was putting away the folding map of one of his games the other day and recalled a game he hadn't thought of in 25 years. It was a very simple roll and move fantasy RPG from 1992 called Key to the Kingdom, and went into his what he calls the temperature-controlled nostalgia vault, which is his unfinished basement, and surprisingly still had a copy. It's a very simple game, but you had this folding map. A player could, by reaching a certain point on the map, unfold or refold the map and change the surrounding area. I realize you couldn't put too many pieces on a map like this, says Henry, but it would make for an interesting way to alter the game. Have you seen anything similar to this in your travels? I'd love to see a modernized version of this game.
Well, it sounds cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's not quite the same. We had the folding boards of Keeper, and there's the folding stuff in Fold It, but that's not quite the same thing.
Actually, those were the two of the three things I thought of, too. I thought of Keeper, Keeper is more of a gimmick than anything else.
Yeah.
Because you really have, like, I think is it 4 different ways to fold that board? So they could have just given you 2 boards, right?
Right.
Friedman Freese did that kind of puzzly type thing. Do you remember that, where you like folded it and you had to move a guy like through a maze from one side to the other?
Folder, it's called. And it was a solo game where you had to move the guy through the maze, and you can fold on a particular axis and go around the backside of the paper. But something that has an exploration mechanic. Usually we see that sort of thing as just adding tiles to a board, a modular board. The foldable, I guess my question is, if you had this foldable thing, what's to keep you from just spreading the whole thing out on the table, unless it's possible to fold 2 ends together and make them connect in the world in different ways? I'm sure there's probably interesting ways to do this in a strange puzzle folding way.
Yeah, but not to mention, when you fold stuff too, it does, even if you keep folding and unfolding something, that does wear and tear on it.
Oh, yeah. But designers, get on this. And engineers to make it, more resilient.
All right, Derek asked us, will we show up at PAX South 2019? As many people have told us, the tabletop footprint at PAX South seems to grow every year. There's lots of huge tabletop area and floor space, and it seems to grow. But most of the con is actually about video games. We know that. That's the way PAX East and PAX Prime are. Mm-hmm. But he says he knows it's not anyone other than Penny Arcade's obligation to ensure PAX South has quality exhibitors or panelists, but it does feel like the South Central U.S. market is underserved. So he said many industry vendors and media feel the cost to attend such events is simply not worth the investment. Besides, there's nothing to see at PAX South they couldn't see at PAX East or PAX West. It'd be interesting if vendor media attendance at PAX South could be made possible by a form of crowdfunding. Instead of a media member having to expense a trip and accommodations for PAX South, perhaps they could raise more than what's needed if public fan interest exceeds expectations. So then he's just talking about how great it is to go to PAX. I don't doubt that. I think PAX is fantastic. But the fact of the matter is, and let's speak from 2 ends. Let's talk about the publishers first, then we'll talk about us specifically.
Yeah.
Publishers get asked to go to a gazillion conventions all the time. They have to sit there and go, which ones make sense financially? They don't necessarily have to make money at a convention, but they usually try to break even at least. and if they're getting word out about their games. But they have to do their job too. Going to conventions is part of their job, but so is actually, publishing the games.
Right.
And going to convention after convention after convention can get really tiring, so they have to pick the ones that best serve them. So there's some conventions. Almost everyone goes to Gen Con. A lot of people go to Essen. Origins is a bigger con. And there's also, you don't see these, but there's a lot of trade shows.
Yes.
Each of the big distributors runs a trade show, ACD and Alliance and GTS. Some of them run 2 trade shows over the course of a year. And so they're going to a lot already. So to convince them to come, well, you just have to try on your own. I mean, really, I don't, there's no one trying to stop it. Also, I should mention, if you're complaining about being in the South Central, BGG Con exists. And that's
true.
In Dallas, Texas. I don't know. That seems like a good convention to go to.
Yep. Texas is big. you know.
Yeah, Texas is big. I get that. But as for us specifically, I would like to go there, as I would like to go to all of them. I went to PAX East in 2017. I did not go back in 2018, not because I disliked the con, but because we can only go to so many cons. In fact, we have already decided in 2018 that we're going to pull back from a few cons. We're going to be going to Dice Tower West, Dice Tower Con, Dice Tower Cruise, the Dice Tower Retreats. That's a bunch of Dice Tower stuff. Then Gen Con, Essen, and Gamma. And beyond that, we'll have to see. We've said we probably won't be going to CMON-Con. We probably won't go to Origins. We probably won't go to Grand Con or some of these other cons because there's a couple things. One is money, obviously. But you mentioned crowdfunding to do that. Sure, I get that. But the other is time. Eric supposedly has to read books.
Supposedly? Where's that come from?
I'm sorry. What I meant is Eric supposedly has to spend a lot of time on these books.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know what the supposedly, it was an effort at mild humor. Sorry. So Eric, essentially, Eric has to read a lot.
True.
And it's not something you can be like, oh, quick, read the book faster.
No, it takes the time it takes.
Well, if you read really fast, can't we slow you down?
The plane rides do help a little bit, but that doesn't necessarily make up for the time spent away from the studio and more prep time and that sort of thing.
And that's not even counting time spent away from family.
Yeah.
Right. So there's that. And then, for me, I actually have to review and put out the content. If we went to conventions all the time, we would turn into the fantasy writers that everyone gets mad at.
Yes.
Where someone will say, why isn't this author written a book? And I see them at conventions all the time. And that's where people would get, upset. So sure. So what we're going to do, we'll go to a convention, a new and different convention once in a while. We just can't go to them all the time. And I get emails all the time where people say, why don't you go to this convention? Why aren't you here? This convention's fantastic. I'm sure they are. If I ranked all my conventions, I could, and I won't do this, but I could tell you my least favorite convention that I've been to. And even that one was pretty good. I mean, conventions are fun. I mean, they can be tiring and exhausting, but they're fun. And so when you say this one's fantastic, I believe you.
Yeah.
We just can't go to all of them.
I mean, just looking at PAX alone, there are, 4, 5? There's East, West, Unplugged, South, and Australia, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. And the fact is, we can't go to all of them, so we picked one, and that's Unplugged.
Yeah.
Which also, by the way, we are planning to go to in 2019.
Yes.
In fact, if you go to our website, you can click. There's a link there that will tell you all the conventions we're planning to go to and who on the Dice Tower staff is planning to go to each one.
Yes.
So hopefully that will help out a lot. And you know what? There's always a chance we'll go to PAX South someday. I just don't know.
Right. Pete says, about 11 years ago, you were still living in Korea, Tom, and you mentioned board game cafes, which were something I had never heard of, so I sent in a question asking about them. You answered it on the show and talked about the Asian board game cafe model. 11 years later, there's now a huge proliferation of westernized board game cafes. How do you feel about them? Do they compete against friendly local game stores? Is there something major Western cafes do differently? Any guesses where we will be in another 11 years?
This one's a tough one because I love game cafes, slash pubs, slash restaurants, slash whatever, right? Mm-hmm. I think they're awesome. They're cool. I've been to some that are obviously much better than other ones. I have yet to been the one that's better than Snakes and Lattes. That's the top of the walk. But there's a lot of great ones. But they're hard to run. You are essentially running a restaurant, which is easily. I shouldn't say easily. I don't know for sure, but from what I understand, restaurants has the highest failure rate of any business. And then combining that with a board game thing. So you have to be a restaurant first or a cafe first or whatever, and then board games. It's a very hard model to follow, and we're seeing several of them fail. Just like we see board game stores fail. So I would love to see one in every city, but they also only work in very specific areas. They're almost always by a college. Not always, but almost always. Or in a district where a lot of people, there's like walk-by, traffic.
Right. Have you seen differences between the stuff you were looking at 11 years ago in Korea and the places you visited here?
Yeah, they're really different, but that's also a major difference in the culture. Mm-hmm. In the Korean culture, people did a lot of things in large groups, so a large group would sweep in the door and play a lot of party games. In American culture / Canadian culture, there's a lot more dating. Like, I'm going out on a date, so me and my date will go play a game together, maybe quietly or having fun. Groups will still do things, but it's just a very different dynamic. I remember at game cafes in Korea that there was more than 50% were female. I'm not necessarily seeing that at game cafes, but again, Korea was also a very dense country, so it was very easy to get around from one spot to the other. America is much more spread out. So again, this only really works well in a metropolis city that I've seen so far. The most successful ones I know are in LA, Orlando, Toronto, places like that.
Okay. I think I've got 2 or 3 within about half an hour from the house.
Remember, you're in a very densely populated area of the country.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
So, I don't know. I think they're a great idea. I would like to see them succeed. I don't know if that's the future or not. You know what, though?
What?
I'm out of questions, I think.
Oh, really?
Well, I'm out of questions from July past. I can go back and look at questions that people, because we didn't get to all the questions, I'm sure. But if you've sent in a question, I haven't answered it, and you still want to hear the answer, you need to send it in again. And we need questions. Please send us questions at questions@dicetower.com.
Otherwise, we're going to do the question segment and just sit here.
We'll ask each other questions. So, Eric, what's your favorite game?
Yeah. What color did you paint your hallway?
Did you paint your hallway?
No, I didn't. Just I was thinking about it.
I'm thinking about it too, but then I thought maybe it'd be better if I hired someone else.
Yeah, I need to hire someone to paint my ceiling. See, this is what it'll be like if we don't have questions. You need to send
Don't
those
make
in.
us go down that route. Only you could stop.
We can't
talk. All right. Well, speaking of that, let's talk about some truly epic stuff in our top 10.
It's a Dice Tower Top 10!
The Dice Tower's Top 10 list is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc. Cool Stuff Inc. Cool stuff in stock at coolstuffinc.com.
All right. I would like to head off some negative stuff before we start.
Oh, really? Okay.
Well, we're talking this about epic games.
Yes.
We realize that some of you out there are into gigantic war games that take years to complete.
Yes.
And so that anything we say compared to you is not going to be epic enough. I get it.
I've heard that exact comment from Mr. Engelstein. He's like, seriously? That's not epic. Let's talk 28 hours epic. Multiple months.
So I specifically, to clarify the parameters I put on my list, I tried to pick games that I thought were truly epic, but also fun.
Okay.
So that eliminates a lot of those games that you all are talking about.
I mean, you said something about games that give you that epic feeling, and so yeah, many of mine are not as long. Maybe are simpler than some of these much more complex games. But I actually have a bit of an issue with getting epic games to the table. There's several on Tom's list that I would love to play, but I just never get them to the table. And so I really can't put them on the list and call them a favorite, even though I'm sure they fit. It's a much more difficult thing to get played for me.
Right, and I also realize, and so does Eric, as we get older, there's a bell curve here, right? When we were in our teens and in college, we had time to play very long games. As we have families and responsibilities, our games are getting shorter and shorter. That will be epic. However, once we're old, and Eric stops reading books,
yep,
and we retire to that board game community, which someone's going to start up.
Sure, I'm expecting in the next 10, 20 years, right?
We'll get back to the epic, super long games. Or maybe not.
We can just rent an RV, or buy an RV, I guess, in our retirement and just go from convention to convention. And
Actually,
we can play.
I thought about that. That would be an interesting thing. Not so much the RV, but we're showing up in town. Who's coming to the game night? Bop, 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 bop. And I show up with my library of games. And everyone's like, what?
It's like a bookmobile, but it's a game-mobile.
Okay, all joking aside, I think that's a possibility.
Yeah. All right. That's the retirement plan for the Dice Tower. When we hit episode 1000, that's what's happening.
I want this discussion in the guild. I want to hear or in Facebook. I want people to talk about this because if something like this happened, would you if you hey, the mobile Dice Tower is coming to town, would you go? I don't know. It sounds interesting. This is futuristic. We're not actually planning this.
Right.
Let's get to epic games.
Let's do it.
Number 10.
Number 10 is Tiny Epic Galaxies. No, it isn't. It isn't. I don't have any Tiny Epic games on my list.
Oh, that's right. I was going to say, Eric took my joke, but I was going to say all the games on my list, one thing that will not be used to describe them is the word tiny.
Is tiny. My number 10 is Star Trek Fleet Captains. This is WizKids game with all the little hero clicks, starship minis, and I love the nature of this where you've got it's a rather large footprint as you've got these little tiles, map tiles, discovering planets. You can play this as a partnership game or even I guess a 3-faction game if you have the expansion, and you're deploying all of these starcraft and completing missions, and it has an arc as you're trying to race to a certain number of points, destroying the other ships, completing missions, getting items, and traveling all over the known space. It is. I mean, one thing about epic games is they tend to have a longer playtime, and this certainly does that. But I think it is worth the investment if you want to capture that Star Trek feeling. Star Trek Fleet Captains, my number 10.
Yeah, this is definitely a game that I like a lot, so definitely one I considered. My number 10 is Descent. Now, you're going to find that I'm going to have somewhat of a theme here. In the past 10 years or so, one of the games I consider to be epic, I found that I can play some more epic games by breaking them into smaller chunks, whether it be campaign or legacy style, and when I'm done, it feels like an epic feeling. I don't know if you deliberately excluded this, Eric, or not.
Deliberately excluded Descent or legacy games?
Legacy/campaign games.
I did. I thought about legacy games. In fact, when we did this list, I think it was 2013 was the last time we visited Epic Games.
Yeah, we both put Risk Legacy on our list.
We both put Risk Legacy on the list. And I think at the time, that whole concept of a legacy game was like, yes, this is epic. I think the smaller chunks aspect has sort of, I've backed away from that a little bit as being epic. I see it much more episodic. I get what you're saying, but I did leave out the legacy
episodic,
stuff.
But I think episodic can be epic. So anyway, Descent 2.0, specifically, second edition. Come on, where's that third edition? Anyway, I think that's a game that certainly feels like this. I like going through this, and it gets more and more intense each game. Like, oh, I got better special abilities and stuff. I really like it. So my number 10, Descent.
Number 9.
Number 9 actually came up in discussions about Hail Hydra on Dice Tower Tonight not too long ago. Battlestar Galactica is a game that offers some great dramatic moments, but a bit of a longer playtime. It takes a little bit more time to build that tension, to build up to those big reveal moments. Who you throw in the brig, and who can be trusted, and who you thought you could trust for most of the game, and then you finally can't in that pivotal moment. Those moments are fantastic, but it has that more epic, grandiose, especially if you add in the expansions where you're stopping at all these extra ports and stuff. It has a longer arc to get there. Still, a great game. You just have to put in that time investment to reach those points. Battlestar Galactica, number 9.
Yeah, this one has dropped for me considerably, but that's because I'm finding that I like this kind of social deduction thing in a faster game.
Yes.
My number 9 is Eldritch Horror, where Fantasy Flight set up, and I don't know if they deliberately lied to all of us, but they said, no, I'm serious. I was there when they announced Eldritch Horror, and they said, we're going to have a more streamlined version of Arkham Horror, and it's not going to be inundated with all these expansions. You know what? I just put Eldritch Horror in the Dice Tower library today. I'm sure there's a gazillion things in that game now when you play a game of this. It's epic. It's all over the earth. It's huge. It's big. I like it. It's about as big as I want to get. But, yes, if you want to... You know what? I think my record for Eldritch Horror is like 2 out of 30 for wins. But, yeah, it's still big, fun, and epic. Eldritch Horror.
Number 8.
My number 8 is an epic splotter game. It's called Roads and Boats. It's you look at this on the table, it doesn't look all that attractive, but this is one of those crunchy resource management. There's a lot to figure out, a lot of mechanisms and gears and cogs and stuff that you have to figure out. You're making connections on the board. You are figuring out who's going to produce what's going to produce what, how to claim more territories. You can produce more stuff. It's crunchy. And I think the only splotter game that may be more epic and crunchy than this is Antiquity, and I haven't actually played that one. But Roads and Boats is one that's going to keep you thinking and keep you staring at that board. And when you're done, it feels like you have accomplished something. Roads and Boats, number 8.
My number 8 is one that I think some people might expect to be higher on the list, and that's Twilight Imperium 4th Edition. I really like it. It definitely is a humongous, epic space experience. It is easily, completely, and definitely one of the ultimate space epics of empire building, and I cannot think of any other game in the genre that does it better. But I just don't play it that much anymore because it's so long. It's too epic for me to handle almost. And I don't know that I want to sit down for the 8 hours. And every time I say this, someone's like, it only takes us 4 hours. Great.
Congratulations.
But it takes me 8 hours. And I don't know if I'm just bad at picking players, but whatever it is, it takes that long. And I like it. It's fun, but it is my number 8 because that's how many hours it takes.
Number 7.
Number 7 in other lists would be my number 1, but as you're looking for an epic game, you have to go to a variant of Merchant of Venus where you play to a higher total. And this allows for longer-term strategies, larger freighters to come into play, and to really see all the mechanisms of the economy of Merchant of Venus work. I really enjoy doing it. You only want to do that with experienced players, because Merchant of Venus with new players can take a while if you're playing just to 2,000 space credits. But if you're playing 3 or 4,000, you get to see some really cool stuff going on with the whole machinery happening in this game. I love doing that, but it is still a little more limiting than some of these other epic games that are farther along on the list, which is why it's number 7 and not further on. Merchant of Venus to 4,000 space bucks.
I say that I'm still confused about this 4,000 thing.
So ordinarily you play the game to 2,000. You start with an initial investment of like 60 or 80.
So this is not like some official variant or anything, or is it an official variant?
It's in the rule book. You can adjust the goalposts,
Why can't you
basically.
say 10,000 then?
Well, you could. It'll take you... I don't know if it will do much more than going to 4,000 will, but it is a very different game going from 2,000 to 4,000.
Dog.
Yeah. To 10,000. Okay.
My number 7 is higher on Eric's list, so we will discover it then, I hope.
Number 6.
My number 6 is so epic that they often recommend not playing the full game. The Colonists is another resource management game where you're collecting these resources and building buildings, and it is in 4 ages. And technology sort of becomes obsolete as this game continues. And I have only played up to 2, the first 2 ages of this game. But technology moves forward if you want to play the full 4-age game, and it's going to take you a while. I think this is another 8-hour epic. But the way that the technology becomes obsolete, how you have goals that you can only achieve once you reach new ages, I see how all that works, and I haven't had the investment opportunity to play the full game, but I kind of want to see how it all works. The Colonists, number 6.
Yeah, I have a bag at my house with the 5th age or something in it.
Oh.
And I'm like, come on now. I like the Colonists. It's really fun.
Yeah.
It just does. I don't know that it gives the fun quotient per length of the game. But the problem is you could skip like age 1 and 2, but you kind of need that build up. It really feels like a splatter game. I don't know why this one hasn't got more love.
Oh, I mean, it's probably just that epic time frame.
My number 6 is Sidereal Confluence. Oh, this game is amazing. I think it works best in a big situation. It's like a convention style game where you get a whole bunch of people together and you're trading all sorts of things back and forth, and you can get, I think it's 7 or 8 people trading, and you have all these resources, and it's like the ultimate go around. I'll trade you this for this and this and this and this and this. It's very Euro-y, it's very QB, but it is such an excellent game. Sidereal Confluence.
Number 5.
Number 5, Tom and I sync up, and I think solely this is because we saw some amazing setups one year at TotalCon, and that's Heroescape, where you can play tiny little games of Heroescape. Sure, no problem. Just set up like 1 or 2 tiles and just move 3 or 4 people across the board, no biggie. But you can set up games of Heroescape that will take you all day. And it's often easy to forget how long it may take to move across these giant maps. But you can create these amazing structures. It's a half building set with all these cool terrains and produce some amazing stuff. And epic world-spanning battles. Heroescape, my number 5. And Tom's too.
Yeah, it wasn't because of TotalCon. I already knew about Heroescape before that. It's just that I've built some amazingly big things. We're talking about possibly doing that again this year. Building a big Heroescape thing. I'm keeping that in my head. I have an idea of when and where I'm going to do it. But very, very excited about it. Heroescape. Yeah, I agree. It can be epic. It can be small, too, but not really that small. It can be a big, epic, fun game.
Number 4.
My number 4 is going to show up on Tom's list, but I can see he's just upgraded his movement, so I think I'll be hearing from him very soon.
My number 4 is Pandemic Legacy. And this is Season 1 or Season 2. I like Season 2 a little bit better, but, I mean, it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other. Yes, I understand this is broken up into episodes, but they are so exciting, and it's an overall great story. There are a lot of legacy games that I like that did not make the list. Specifically, Risk dropped off. The Charterstone is a really fun game, but it didn't have that gripping, epic story, and Pandemic does, to the point where whenever someone plays a Pandemic, I'll be like, ooh, I heard you play this game. Let's talk about such and such a month. Tell me what character did this thingamabobber.
Right.
And we all know what we're talking about because it was that epic. And I love it. So my number 4, Pandemic Legacies.
Yeah, you may have convinced me that I was perhaps a little hasty in excluding the legacy games. Pandemic Legacy probably would have been on here somewhere. I agree. When you put the whole thing together as a 12-month thing, yes, that is an epic experience, and you feel that arc, and But when you look at each individual game, it doesn't necessarily feel that each individual one isn't as epic, and I think that's where I was in my exclusion.
I understand. I'm not even giving you garbage over it.
I know, I'm just torn with my decision here.
Number 3.
My number 3 was Tom's number 7. That is Xia, Legends of a Drift System. Xia can be epic if you play to the full point total. You can adjust the length of the game by playing to a certain number of points. You can play like a 10-point game, a 12-point game. But if you play the full 20, this one will take a while. But if you do that, it allows you to do lots of cool stuff. You get to explore more of the map. You get to upgrade more of your ships, really customize and get to those level 2 and level 3 ships that do some amazing things, get some cool powers. The customization of what your vehicle is in this game is really cool, and it creates an epic narrative arc as how people are scoring their points. Do you go for the pick up and deliver? Do you go exploring? Do you attack the other players? Do you attack the NPCs? It really creates the sandbox title that gets thrown around a lot, and feels like a world that you're playing in. Xia, Legends of a Drift System.
Yeah, I agree. It doesn't have to necessarily be epic. You can play shorter, smaller games of it, but you play that full game, and it's an epic space thing. And this one's really I've been jonesing on this one to get it to the table again for a while. In fact, I'm looking at it now, thinking about it, sitting on the shelf over there, taunting me.
Yeah.
Xia, for sure.
Have you played the expansion, Tom?
So let's go to my number 3. Which was Eric's number 4, and that's Scythe. But mine is different than Eric's. I think Eric's just talking about Scythe.
I am.
So go ahead and talk about that briefly then.
Well, I think this one is epic in my mind due to table presence, especially if you got the Kickstarter or the extender board where you can flip it over and add the little extra board. Things are just larger. It takes up a good amount of table space. There's a lot of moving parts. You've got that board that you start out being, you've got actions, but then you gradually upgrade them. The ball rolling aspect, and as everyone's reach keeps getting bigger, I mentioned, advancing your ability to move around the board. You start out only interacting with a couple of neighbors, but soon everybody else starts being able to jump into your territory as well. And the whole thing, the world just keeps getting bigger and bigger. Your sphere of influence keeps expanding in Scythe. I just love the way it evolves.
Okay, that's fine. I feel differently. I think Scythe by itself is not as big and epic as it seems. Mm-hmm. I'm talking about with the new Rise of Fenris campaign system. It's an 8-game system, and you play them back to back to back to back. And some of them aren't even that long. They're shorter than a normal Scythe game, but it is unbelievably amazing. It is just fantastic. I love it. It turns Scythe into, my opinion, an epic game, and one that I would gladly play again through, even knowing all the stuff that would happen. So that's Scythe with Rise to Fenris.
Yeah. Do you need to have followed all of the expansions to make Fenris work?
You can play just with Scythe and go to Rise to Fenris. In fact, the first expansion for Scythe just adds 2 more factions, basically. So you don't need them.
Right.
And the second one adds airships, and you don't need those, although Rise to Fenris says if you're using airships, you can use them, but you can't even use them in several of the missions of the campaign. So it's best to play it with just basic Scythe.
Oh, all right. Cool.
Number 2.
Number 2 is the pick up and deliver game that beats out Merchant for me. That's Firefly, at least if you're looking for an epic game. You can add on, so there's Firefly, and then they added one side of the board, and then they added another side of the board, and then you've got all sorts of extra factions, and this game becomes very, very large. And some of the missions, the setups in Firefly, can take a good amount of time because you have to build up your crew, and then you have to go on all these adventures, and you have to achieve all these crazy, deal with this person over here and become friends with them, and then you have to deal with these guys over here, and there is a lot of narrative scenarios in Firefly that can feel very epic, like you have just completed a season of the TV show, and yes, it can take a while. but I think it feels like you've got those ups and downs of an actual set of episodes of the series. Firefly, my number 2.
Yeah, it's a little too epic for me, but My number 2 is Seventh Continent. I think Seventh Continent is a fantastic game, and it's pretty long to go through each of the curses. You're going to go through this curse. You're going to go and discover, all sorts of cool things, and you play through several hours, and you probably will die. So then you go back through and play again, and you go through, and maybe you'll die, maybe you'll succeed. But I think when you combine those two, that's super epic. And you can do that, I think, like 8 or 9 times, however many curses are in the box. That's a lot of gaming, and I love it. I love Seventh Continent. It almost made my number 1 on this list. So my number 2, Seventh Continent.
I wanted to put this on the list. I cannot count the number of times in the last 6 months or so that I have said, all right, I've got some time. What are we going to play? Oh, I'd love to do Seventh Continent. I don't have time to get into Seventh Continent. I don't have that amount of time. It's been so many times that I've wanted to get it to the table and have not done so because I don't think I have enough time to play it. And it burns a little bit.
And finally, number 1.
Number 1 is the space epic. I haven't played Twilight Imperium, so this is my space epic. I realize people don't like this for various reasons, but Eclipse, to me, is my space epic. It has that the resource management. It has the technology, the customization of your ships. How you can take an entire fleet of things against someone, and your ships are so much different than their different style ships. They built totally differently, and then you get to see how they interact. Do you have tons of missiles on your guys, but they have no shields, or do you go up against somebody that's built hulls all over the place, and the different faction abilities, and just exploration as you fill out the board, and then if you go real crazy, you can get like 9 factions or something at the same time. It's crazy stuff. Eclipse, fantastic game. My number 1.
Yeah, well, I'm certainly interested in trying out the new version of Eclipse that's coming out. That was just kickstarted. I want to see how they've changed things and stuff. I like the Eclipse. Sometimes I get a rap that I don't like it, mostly because I'm kind of saying, hey, Twilight's better, but I would like to go back to it, revisit it, try it again, and I see how much I enjoy it.
Yeah.
My number 1 is Gloomhaven because it truly is epic. I don't know how much more about it I can say that I haven't said already. Very similar to Descent as my number 10, where basically I'm just going through mission after mission, but it's part of an overall story. You get cooler. There's ups, there's downs. Characters can retire in the middle, and you'll get other characters. It's just super exceedingly fun. So that is Gloomhaven, my number 1.
At this point, I'm waiting for my son to get a little older and want to play this with me, because that's the only way I'm going to build that darn organizer.
Actually, I just bought a Gundam model.
Oh.
Macross model.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, hey, so I went to the store and I bought it, and the guy said, I was going to buy a real big one. The guy said, that is a gazillion pieces. I was like, oh, okay. He's like, the smaller ones are better to start with. I was like, all right, so I got it. I opened it up and I was like, what? It has a gazillion pieces. So I didn't get the bigger one. So me and Holly, my number 3 daughter, we're working on it together, and it's going to take us a while. We have the arms, head, and torso built. So now the legs, but the legs are really big. So it's good. I'm surprised how many pieces are in this thing.
So you've got it's a Veritech, but it's in its robot mode.
It's an RX-72.
Okay.
I'm sorry, an RX-78 Gundam. I don't know any more about it.
Oh, it's a Gundam.
It's Gundam. I said Macross. I'm sorry.
Okay.
They all look the same to me, Eric.
Yeah, I know nothing about Gundam, but you tell me about Robotech, and I'm like, yeah, okay.
They still all look the same to me. But anyway. All right, my number 10, the People's Choice number 10 is Zaya.
All right.
Eldritch Horror is their number 9. 8 is Twilight Imperium 3rd edition. Number 7 is Rising Sun.
Okay.
Yeah, I can see that. Number 6 is Twilight Imperium 4th edition. I bet next year, or the next time we do this, Twilight Imperium 3rd edition will be off the list.
Could be.
Number 5 is Scythe. Number 4, Blood Rage. I don't know that I would consider Blood Rage an epic game, but I can see why people consider it to be one.
I can see that. Yeah, I also didn't think it quite has the footprint to be an epic.
Number 3 is Gloomhaven. Number 2 is Pandemic Legacy. And number 1, Star Wars Rebellion, which, to clarify to those listening, was my number 11. All right,
okay.
I think, and War of the Ring, I think, was my number 12.
Yeah,
They both have that same feeling to them. So, anyhow, I thought that was very interesting. I really like the idea of this. And again, I understand everyone's going to have a different version of Epic. For some people, the games we mentioned are going to be too long. And for other people, they're going to laugh how short they are. But
I'm sure.
Here we have a forum for this purpose, or 2 of them. You can go to our forums at Board Game Geek, find those on our website, dicetower.com, go to forums, or you can go to our Facebook Dice Tower page and definitely talk about how we were wrong there. That's the whole purpose of these. The more people talking about it, the more choices others who read it have.
Indeed.
I'm not sure this was an epic episode.
No, we'd have to add a couple hours.
Yeah, I'm okay with the way they are. Oh, well. So, hey, we'll see you guys at Grand Con or the Midgard Convention in Iceland, or we'll see you back here in a couple weeks. Actually, I think I'm 3 weeks away now, right?
You'll be back in 2 weeks. I'll be here with Mandy in 1.
Oh. Okay, well, that sounds fantastic. Thanks so much, guys, for listening. Time flies. Until next time, I'm Tom Vassell.
I'm Eric Summerer.
And you've been listening to The Dice Tower.
Thanks for listening. Promotional consideration has been provided by game publishers in the form of review copies of games. This episode, number 572, was recorded September 6th, 2018. Coming up next week, Mandy and I are at Grand Con, and we'll discuss our experiences there. And in 2 weeks, Tom and Suzanne team up for a new Top 10 list. This podcast is sponsored by listeners like you. Thank you for your continued support. And speaking of support, the Jack Vassell Memorial Fund is dedicated to providing support to members of the board gaming community in their hour of need. If a catastrophic event has become more than you can handle, find out how we can help at jackvassell.org. The Dice Tower is produced by Tom, Mandy, Suzanne, and Eric, with assistance from Itai Perez, Derek Porter, and Rob Searing. Inefficient harvesting tools provided by My Little Scythe. Timothy Pinkham composed our theme, and hosting is provided by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games at great prices at coolstuffinc.com. Let us know what you think of the show by posting to the Dice Tower Guild at BoardGameGeek.com, following the Dice Tower on Twitter, or by emailing us at dicetower@gmail.com. And don't forget to visit the other shows in the Dice Tower Network, including Board Games with Panda, The Broken Meeple, Start Space, The Secret Cabal Gaming Podcast, Tabletop Game Talk, Board Game Blitz, and Dice Tower Tonight. Find out more at dicetowernetwork.com. Until next time, from all the gang at the Dice Tower, have fun gaming. So when we make our board game mobile, what sort of vehicle do you want? We don't want just like a boring school bus or anything, right?
It almost would have to be like 2 vehicles, right? One is the camper that we've converted to have game rooms inside it.
Yeah.
And then the other is a little van that follows, but that has all the games.
Okay.
Maybe it would become like a whole convoy. Convoy. And it's like a whole thing. We show up and we do mobile conventions.
We got a board game convoy. Dun, 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 dun.